Doom: The Dark Ages Revelations is upon us. A few weeks back, id Software and Bethesda were kind enough to invite a cadre of influencers and press, including yours truly, to get an early sneak peek of the upcoming DLC, with a Q&A session with director Hugo Martin and producer Marty Stratton. In this video, I'll be discussing what I learned about Revelations' new mechanics, experimental structure, as well as what's up with those flashback missions. There's a lot to get through, so let's not waste any more time and get ripping and tearing now. There was a lot that id shared in their preview presentation, and with the heap of information I came away with, I think the best place to start is with the most novel and perhaps experimental aspect of this DLC, the structure. Now, real quick, the gameplay footage you'll be seeing was provided by Bethesda. However, there's only so much, so you will see some repeats, along with my own footage from the base game to supplement. According to id, Revelations will take around 10 to 12 hours to beat, which of course depends on the difficulty you play on, and will be roughly the size of both parts of Doom Eternal's DLC, The Ancient Gods, combined. What's surprising though is that it is only made up of 4 maps, including the hub zone. So obviously these maps are going to be huge to fit all that gameplay, right? Oh, absolutely. Each map will be layers and layers of activities. Where it gets interesting though is how all of this is going to be organized, when you can access these activities, and where. Basically, the campaign is made up of 2 structures, which can be filtered through 2 objectives overlays on the map screen: base game and end game. Base game is probably obvious to a lot of you. It's the critical story path through each map that, according to id, makes up 60% of the campaign. Endgame is the remaining 40% and is all of the activities you can access, or rather discover, after completing the base game, found by retraversing and exploring these maps. During endgame progression, players will find new pathways and sections in each map, bringing with them puzzles, endgame resources and upgrades, and lots more excuses to shoot stuff. And Hugo promised during the Q&A portion that this won't feel like the maps being rehashed. He said these endgame areas will be distinct experiences, new geo as he called it, new missions layered into these vast maps. Now, in terms of the content that will come from endgame progression, there's Praetor suit challenges, which are encompassed within their own unique arenas, as well as Slayer trials, described as arcade mode levels that are scored. Beating these challenges through the course of the endgame earns players pieces of something called the Astral Key, and when completed, it unlocks the Uber Boss. Obviously, what the Uber Boss is being kept under wraps. Frankly, I was surprised they even mentioned it, but I'm sure it's going to be something horrifically difficult. $20, it's John Romero's head on a stick again. Maybe a cyber John Romero's head on a stick, held in the right hand of an otherworldly, mutated Sandy Peterson. I'm mostly joking, but part of me actually really wants to see that. It doesn't end there though, oh no. As after players beat the Uber Boss, they'll be able to access the Master Arenas, which again, are housed within each of the maps, described as 4 unique, intensive combat spaces, featuring the hardest encounters of the game, and beating them will reward content for the Repertorium, like new maps, encounter presets, all sorts of stuff. And yes, the Repertorium will be launching into its 3rd iteration when the DLC drops. While we're on the subject of the Repertorium, while Finishing Move is returning to score the music for this DLC, it revealed that composer Andrew Hulshult was hired to compose new tracks for the Repertorium exclusively. If you need a reminder, Hulshult composed the soundtracks for the Doom Eternal DLC, Ancient Gods, along with David Levy, and handled the updated soundtracks for the Doom and Heretic remasters. He's also responsible for a slew of excellent indie FPS scores, including Amid Evil, Proteus, Nightmare Reaper, and one of my all-time favorites, Dusk. I'm stoked he's been invited back to Doom. They should let him score another campaign! Oh, sorry about that. Some crazy person just ran by with good opinions. The most hype piece of endgame content for me, though, are the classic levels. And that's right, you eagle-eyed Doomers, you did see some classic pixelated Doom maps in the trailer. To quote Hugo directly, you'll be able to unlock playable spaces from classic Doom games. Now, the specific thing said was classic Doom games, which makes me think these won't be relegated to just Doom 1 and 2 maps, but also Doom 64 maps. Wouldn't be a big surprise there, as 64 has had some big influence on the current Doom titles. Maybe maps from prominent expansions like Final Doom, and dare I say, could we be seeing some Doom 3 here? Seems like a long shot, probably is, but this id team is crazy enough to do that. So yeah, with all packed into this game, it's clear to see how these 4 maps might encompass up to 12 hours of gameplay, and the approach to structuring all of it is very different compared to past Doom titles. One part Metroidvania, another part open world, but aiming for classic Doom level design focus and exploration. Speaking of Metroidvania, early on, you may have caught me mentioning a hub, and indeed, there will be a hub, the Slayer's Hub as it's officially named. Apparently, it's a prison for him too. The Slayer's Hub will connect all these vast maps together, allowing players to traverse freely between them. So is it like the Fortress of Doom from Doom Eternal, some of you may be wondering? Nope. According to id, this is a huge step up from that, as the hub is a massive map that will expand as players progress, with, to quote id, Metroidvania-esque elements. The hub will be rife with areas to explore, combat encounters to be had, puzzles to solve, secrets to unlock, and lore to uncover. Now, I doubt this is going to be some hardcore Metroidvania experience on par with something like Metroid Prime. Id's words were Metroidvania-esque here. But I love Metroidvania FPSs, and I wish there were more of them out there. So seeing Doom experiment with it is really fun for me. Can't help but wonder if this is an indication for where the next mainline game will go. But then again, who knows? This id team can be a little hard to predict in terms of their design. The last thing I'll touch on for structure is the question of the vehicle missions. These were a novel inclusion for Doom in the Dark Ages. Are they here in Revelations? No. Hugo very frankly said, and spoilers for the Dark Ages, but the dragon is dead, Azrak killed it, so no dragon. He did mention they explored bringing the Atlan back, but couldn't figure out how to motivate it story-wise, and decided to leave it out. So, as far as I know, this is a purely on-foot Doom experience, much like the prior games. Since vehicle missions were one of the more polarizing elements of the Dark Ages, I do wonder if they simply went, we tried it, let's stick to what works the best. Perhaps putting the energy into making the new structure work. Cause yeah, the dragon is dead, but it's not like you can't whip up a new flying craft for the Slayer. Personally, I didn't mind the vehicle sections, but I'll live without them for the DLC. And who knows, they could appear again in a future title. Okay, now it's finally time to delve into some gameplay details. But before we continue, if you're new here and are enjoying the content so far, please do me a favor and like and subscribe. It's a huge help with the algorithm and getting my content to more people. It is paramount this information be shared with the Doom faithful. And be sure to shoot me a comment of which aspect of this DLC you're the most excited for, along with any theories you may have about it. I know a lot of you have them. Alright, let's get back to the rippin' and tearin'. Dark Ages represented a new sort of combat loop for the series, one that was more technical and chess-like, so to speak. It was also a loop that needed multiple missions to tutorialize, which was a bit of a weakness for Dark Ages compared to the previous titles. It needed a little more time to click, but when it did click, boy, it was some of the most rewarding combat of the franchise. With Revelations, id doesn't need to worry about teaching players the base loop. They are free to hit the ground running with it at full power, and their goal is to push it further. According to them, Revelations builds upon the base Dark Ages in a way similar to how Eternal builds upon 2016. When the presentation began, Hugo claimed they had spent a year polishing the DLC, and while it was designed to be more of a challenge, their goal was to make the difficulty feel more balanced and better paced compared to the base game. To no surprise, the award-winning difficulty sliders are returning to let Doomers tweak to their heart's desire, although during the Q&A, Hugo did express that he hoped players, in particular the hardcore ones, don't touch the sliders until they beat the base game. He really felt players of all skill levels need to get their bearings with this one before they start cranking things up. All the guns from the base campaign return. There's not much new here, which isn't too shocking. Not sure how much more you could add, frankly. Upgrading your suit, however, is going to be a core aspect, as the narrative revolves around the Slayer constructing new armor, as his old suit somehow gets wrecked. It didn't go into too much detail on this, but I think it's pretty obvious we're about to see the birth of 2016's Praetor suit. Where all the new upgrades and progression is going to be felt is in your left hand, as the big star of the DLC, that pretty much everything is built around, is the spear, being the new left-handed implement along with your shield. To be clear, the shield remains an option for the player. In fact, you will be able to quick swap between the shield and spear during combat. But the spear is definitely the hot new girl that just moved in next door. Along with good old-fashioned stabbing, the spear can be thrown to impale enemies, compared to something like a sniper shot, twirled to deflect bullets, and like the shield can parry green enemy attacks. It can be slammed on the ground for an AoE attack, much like the hammer from the ancient gods, and its slash can rip through enemy armor and shields. Spear abilities will also allow for counters, similar to the sticky bombs from Eternal, and of course, it has its own glory kills. And all of the abilities will be upgradable with their own skill trees. According to Hugo, players will have the freedom to upgrade whatever ability they want, gearing their playstyle around it, and ignore all the others if they so choose. However, by the end of the campaign, they should have enough resources to purchase all of the upgrades, and high-level players will want to invest in all of them so they can have as many tools at their disposal for tougher endgame content. The spear also brings its own movement mechanics. When equipped, the player will be able to dash, returning from Doom Eternal. It can also be used as a grapple hook, much like the meat hook from Doom Eternal, and it will bring a lot more control, like being able to orbit around enemies, which looks freaking fun as hell. Looking at Revelation's high-flying spear combat, it does vibe a lot like Eternal's twitchy fighter jet acrobatics. My knee-jerk reaction to all of this was, oh, the spear represents more of an Eternal playstyle, whereas the shield is the Dark Ages playstyle. Although listening to Hugo and Marty talk about it, it's not quite that simple. During the Q&A session, there were some questions regarding if Dark Ages was being geared towards more of an Eternal feel due to player feedback after the Dark Ages release. Their answer was essentially no. Their attitude was that this is still very much Dark Ages to the core. The main loop is unchanged. It was always a part of the plan to reintroduce some of these elements. Again, it was stressed, this DLC is to the Dark Ages what Eternal was to 2016. These are elements meant to deepen a distinct loop, not change it. Not to mention, this is a past version of the Slayer. Some of his 2016 and Eternal aspects are starting to emerge. Granted, I still need to get my hands on this and feel it for myself, but seeing all that I've seen from the gameplay, I'm doubtful this is Dark Ages morphing into Eternal. However, I do think Revelations is going to be its own distinct beast compared to the Dooms that have come before. Forgive me, I have a bit more on the spear. It is promising that the new implement is going to be mechanically very deep and satisfying, although they did admit it will take some time to get used to. In fact, Hugo theorizes a lot of players will dislike it in the first level, and prefer the shield over it. But he promises that if players stick with it and invest in it, they will come to love it. He feels that once mastered, it will make them feel like Jedis, and allow for a lot of freedom in player skill expression, which I personally loved hearing as I feel that is one of Dark Age's core strengths, that players don't have to follow strict best practices, but have the freedom to invent their own. It was also stressed that enemy AI has been tuned to the spear, being a lot more evasive and forcing players to be more mobile, and that it will be integral for some of the hardest late-game challenges, in particular the Master Arenas. Now, in case we are making the shield feel too much like chopped liver, again, it emphasized that the shield remains a solid option for players to use, exclusively if they want to, although they did claim that there are some powerful metas with using the shield and spear together. Of course, we can't forget enemies, and I can confirm that both the Archviles and Pain Elementals will return, much to my delight and horror. And it appears the Pain Elemental is launching out a new variant of the Lost Soul, a more Lovecrafty looking one, although so far in the field it doesn't seem like they behave all that different from your typical Lost Soul. A new enemy introduced is called the Wizard, that is able to buff enemies on the field. It emphasized players will want to take these suckers out first. There's also going to be new variants on the returning demons, spectral versions of the Whiplash and Revenants, and purple Hell Knights and zombies that can explode, becoming environmental hazards. Looking through the gameplay footage, as well as the trailer, I did find the new shield-bearing, unicycle demon. I'm not sure what it's called. I think this demon is a good example of id tuning the AI to the spear, as this guy is very rapid on his wheel, able to dash about sporadically, and has a wide spin attack that players will need to get away from quickly. During the Q&A, Hugo also mentioned that there will be new blue health zombies, which are obviously there to give players more health, but more so to cut down on the amount of fodder in the field. The base Dark Ages had a lot of fodder so players could get enough resources to heal and armor up, but the amount of them could be irritating as they could crowd up on you out of sight and blindside you, something that was actually bugging me while I was capturing new footage for this video. The blue health zombies carry the amount of health of 4 fodder zombies, and again are meant to cut back on the crowds.
Our flock has been led astray by your acts of defiance.
The last thing we'll touch on is the story, lore, and flashbacks. While Hugo and Marty were more than generous, sharing details on Revelation's gameplay, structure, and endgame content, when it came to the narrative, they were pretty tight-lipped, giving out some fairly vague details. Honestly, the Revelations reveal trailer has the most substantial plot details I've seen. The Slayer is defeated and imprisoned by the Council of Hell and must rebuild himself and his armor to escape. And there's someone helping him, who was more or less confirmed to be the Wretch by id. For those who know the Doom lore, the Wretch built the Praetor suit, which again I'm confident is making its Dark Ages debut. Characters like the Con Maker from Eternal are returning, along with Thera and Valen, who may be trying to mount a rescue effort for the Slayer. There's also a new character, a villain by the looks of it, that was teased, a twin-bladed warrior with a similar tethered chestplate to the Slayer's. I'm thinking this is another Maker-controlled super weapon much like the Slayer, sent to take him out or undermine him in some way. Makes me wonder if id has some big surprises in store for this guy. In taking questions regarding the story, Hugo did mention it will be worth players' time to read the history of the Sentinels from Doom Eternal's lore. He said that should have some big clues as to what's going to happen in this DLC. Hugo also made mention that the story elements will be better weaved through the game. Revelations will feature cinematics like in the base game, but they won't just be bookmarked at the beginning and ending of missions, and there will be more first-person cutscenes to season the narrative, much like the prior games. A lot of questions were thrown out regarding the flashback missions, or Flynn Taggart missions as id was calling them. To remind, Flynn Taggart is the name of the Doomslayer, which was taken from the 1990s Doom novel series. Take note, the Taggart missions are separate from the retro-styled classic Doom missions. Sadly, I don't have anything new to show, as Bethesda didn't provide me any footage of them, save for this one screenshot, and there were only brief new glimpses in the presentation I saw. So I'm gonna throw in some Doom 64 here to supplement. Love that game. From what I can tell you, it appears the Taggart missions are found in the hub world through collecting crystals that somehow conjure the Slayer's memories. While its attitude were that these flashbacks are playable, I also gathered they will be heavily story-driven, and I wonder if they'll be mostly first-person cutscenes rather than full substantial levels. That's just me speculating though, I'm still really fuzzy on them. In terms of visuals I saw from them, there were more glimpses of the Slayer's classic shotgun, as well as a moment when he's holding what looked like a C4 explosive, along with the shot of the memory crystal in the hub world. I wish there was more I could lend here, guys, but looks like we're going to have to wait for the launch to get more answers.
It can't be removed. We scanned it. It's wired to a detonator.
Something Hugo and Marty promised, though, is that there will be tons of lore in this DLC. Plenty of new pages to fatten up the codex, which doesn't surprise me one bit. But what was interesting is that throughout the presentation, they kept mentioning that this DLC draws from the entire franchise history, takes influence from various elements of the past games. The words celebration and culmination were thrown out a few times. This was definitely talked about in regard to the gameplay, but in terms of narrative, Hugo mentioned that this content is 12 years in the making. Some of it is 30 years in the making, and that many of the Dark Ages story elements, including this DLC, were conjured up during the development of 2016. Specifically for the Codex, obviously, but now they're able to pay them off. The obvious takeaway from that is that there are going to be some doozy story revelations, hey, that's the title, coming out of this DLC that could answer some big questions about Doom's admittedly insane and sporadic lore. At one point, the id Boys were asked if we will see more of this Dark Ages era in a future game, and they both smiled and got real cagey, saying, we can't answer that. But they did say they are working on their next game. Personally, I'm highly doubtful this DLC is going to end with the Slayer being put into the sarcophagus we find him in at the beginning of 2016. I think there's going to be one more Dark Ages game with a DLC before that happens. Maybe a third, who knows. I think Revelations is going to be the story of how Flynn became the version of the Slayer that the demons would chronicle in the Slayer Testaments. The version of the Slayer that would eventually step foot back in the blood-soaked halls of the Mars UAC. But that's just my theory. I'm sure there's a Doom lore hound watching who has a better take. There's a lot to be excited for with the Dark Ages Revelations. Something the id Boys were forward about is that while this is a DLC, they are treating it as much more, treating it like a major substantial experience that is, again, a celebration and culmination of the 35-year history of Doom. They are confident it is going to be peak Dark Ages, and even went as far as to say it might be peak Doom. Big words there, fellas. Doom the Dark Ages Revelations drops next week on July 7th. Be sure to let me know in the comments what you think of it, and again, if you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, and share. I'm KIRK, and thank you for watching this video. Stay safe out there, and rip and tear.